You're listening to Tonebenders, the Sound Designers Podcast. Let's do this.
Hey everybody, I'm talking to David Barbee and Wayne Barnett today about their work on the Amazon series The Boys. The Boys is based on the comics by Garth Ennis, and it's a superhero story that's kind of got a dark side to it. It's a little more violent and a little more gory than a lot of other superhero stories, and I really loved it when I watched it. So when I got a chance to talk to these two wonderful sound people, I was really excited about it. So first up is Wade Barnett, the supervising sound editor on The Boys. His past credits include Sound Super on Transparent, Mozart in the Jungle, Sorry for Your Loss. Wade also has a near endless list of credits as an ADR recordist and editor. Welcome to the podcast, Wade.
Thank you very much for having me.
We'll be talking about season 1 of The Boys, but season 2 comes out very soon. Is it right to assume that you continued your role on the new season as well?
Yeah, season 2 is coming out early September now, I think. And we've actually already finished, the whole sound process on season 2.
Also joining us is David Barbee. He was the sound designer on The Boys. David's recent credits include Ballers, Blind Spot, and A Million Little Things. But David's first credits listed on IMDb are Beverly Hills 90210 and Melrose Place. We're kind of laughing at that now, but those were huge shows to be your first credits. Like, how did you get on such a huge production so early?
Oh, you're dating me. I got lucky. Just really what it comes down to. I was working at a facility that was the TV facility, old Tadeo Glen back in the day, and spelling was one of the big clients. And so when I got to start working, the first show they handed me was Melrose Place. And I just got to it.
Cool. That's really great. My first show has been completely forgotten to time, so no one knows it. So it's interesting to have such a big project be your first credit. It's a very rare thing when I interview people and look down their list. So let's talk about The Boys. As I mentioned in that intro, the inspiration for the series is the comic books. Did you guys read those books to get any kind of sound inspiration at all?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we checked them out. I didn't read the whole series, but definitely to learn more about the superhero powers and stuff like that, just so I could, communicate effectively with the showrunner about the direction we wanted to go with the design.
So what was your main role on the series, Wade?
Interfacing with the showrunner, Eric Kripke, who Eric has a huge love for sound. So basically, before we even started with the first turnover, we started in the summer of 2019, I guess it was, going over stuff before even visual effects had really even started, with just kind of drawings and stuff. And I would meet with Eric, and then David and I would get together and just start spitballing stuff, creating sounds, bouncing off Eric. And then after that summer, we started to get the turnovers in for the first episode, and we just built off of that. So my role is basically just trying to figure out what Eric wants and, figure out his ideas for each character. And then after the spotting session, go back and meet with David, just kind of powwow and figure out, where we want to start, with the design process, which there was many layers to that design process.
I imagine there would be, yeah.
It was awesome.
So David, comic books tend to have a lot of automatopoeia for sound effects. As the sound designer, did you take any of the pew-pews and zings as inspiration?
I should have. No, I didn't. I didn't want to go into the series with any preconceived notions. I actually was more interested in knowing what Eric's oral vision on the show was. So I made a point to not get into it ahead of time. I wanted to hear, Eric's thoughts on what he was looking for the show, and then Wade and I would bounce ideas off of one another. We'd start with the trial and error process of trying to figure out what's going to work and what isn't. How do we give each superhero their own voice and make each power unique and different? Theoretically, my client has already done all of that stuff, and they've made their own decisions about what they like and what they don't. So I want to get into their head and understand them.
So how many times did you go back and forth? Episode 1, you're designing from scratch. How many different versions were you sending to the showrunner before you got to the stage, do you think?
The very beginning, before we even kind of got the first turnover, we did about 3 or 4 back and forths for each superhero from the first season. So we had a really good head start, which, on a lot of shows, a lot of TV series, you don't get that luxury. But Eric, gave us that time, which was awesome. And then when we got into the series more, we had more visual effects start to take shape. And we could see how this was going to be and how much time these superheroes were going to be actually on camera. So how the duration of each power and how they were going to be moving and all that kind of thing, which, obviously determines, what sounds you choose. After those first four rounds, I would say that each superhero probably had at least 3, probably sometimes 6 or 7, rounds, which was great. Like I said, Eric Kripke really takes the time to sit down and work with us and let us know what he wants and what he doesn't, which is a lot of work, but it creates a great work environment because we have the correct amount of time to actually polish it, which is really important.
In episode 1, we're introduced to all the superheroes, and they're all good guys, kind of, in episode 1. And as the show goes on, for those that haven't seen it, I won't give out any exact details, but the show goes on, we discover that some of the superheroes aren't as well-intending as we're first led to believe. Did you kind of tackle that change in the sound at all, or were the superhero sounds the same in episode 1 as in episode 8?
We approached it more about trying to match the emotional impact of any given moment. The powers, the base, once we kind of developed what they were, they would be modified based on what the moment needed a whole lot more than trying to make them just sound more evil in general. And that was more the approach than anything else.
So I would like to talk to you about the gore in this show. There are moments where characters explode. There are moments where heads are completely crushed. So there is a lot of bone breaking. There's a lot of blood splatter and oozing gush. You guys really knocked it out of the park because there's a lot of those things. For instance, one of the head crushing, you don't see it at all. And I think it's way worse that I didn't see it. I'd almost rather see it because what you conjured in my mind with the sound design was horrible. And I mean that as a compliment.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah, exactly. What's your base elements? Can you just explain kind of your philosophies behind completely grossing me out?
More is more, yeah?
Bigger is better. With Gore, I think the texture of it is definitely huge. We had the luxury on this show that it's on Amazon, right? So it's not network. We can go as big as we want. You know what I mean? A lot of these sounds probably would have been bounced back as over the top, you know what I mean, had we been in a different platform. It was really cool to be able to push the envelope on this show.
It's the typical elements you would expect. Everything from genuine bone breaks to ice to anything I could find, wood, whatever. From the wetness, it could just be pasta stirring around in a bowl to actual buckets of water to whatever. As Wade said, there's no such thing as too big. So let's make it huge. So I would put in subwoofer. I was going after it from a full spectrum point of view, and I was going after every frequency I could find, every little bit detail, little individual splatters right onto the big full buckets of Stanley Kubrick blood gushing out of the elevator. I mean, whatever you needed.
So what kind of elements were you putting in the sub?
I would just something to give it a little kick. I mean, it could just be a basic sub hit. I mean, the rest of the stuff needed to be more brittle, obviously, and play through in different frequencies. But, like you said, talked about the head exploding. I'm just looking for something to, boom, I want to punch you a little bit when that head explodes. So I want you to feel the pop.
Did you record a lot of source for this, or were you working mostly from library?
I did do a lot of recording in a lot of places when I just couldn't find it or it was just so specific. So I spent a lot of time in my walk-in closet. Boy, I was able to find a lot of material just by poking around, digging into what I actually had, digging into other things. And then, like I said, what I couldn't find, putting towels down on the floor so I don't spill on the carpet. I won't tell you where, but there's plenty of places in there where I'm just performing it with my mouth. There's lots of stuff in the show like that.
And also like to give a shout out to our Foley crew because they did an awesome job with the gore.
Yes.
They're like the guys over at Sovereign Sound, James Howe and those guys. I mean, they did an awesome job delivering us really great gore material. I told them before, ahead of time, I was like, if there's anything you need to do with the Foley in this show, it's the gore.
So you've both said that you couldn't be too big with the gore and the violence, I guess. Is that a directive from the directors and showrunner?
Yeah, like Eric Kripke, I mean, he cares so much about sound. It's really awesome to work with him. I know that I've said that already, but I can't emphasize it enough. As sound editors, we like to go as big as we can. And then a lot of times on the mix stage, they're like, oh, that's over the top. We need to dial it back. And Eric, the whole way, he would say, just go for it. You know what I mean? And be like, he would tell us, let me ask you to pull it back. You know what I mean? He was like, go as big as you want to. Go, push the envelope. It is what the show is. You know what I mean? It's a very dark show. There aren't a lot of other shows that, if any, that have some of these moments, with a face exploding from, the girl sitting on the guy's head. You know what I mean? Like, that is a moment that is very specific to The Boys, and we really needed to, make it shine.
So in addition to the gore and such, there are superhero powers that we are used to. I'm not sure if that's the right way to phrase it, but like Homelander is obviously somewhat of an homage to Superman. So they both can shoot lasers out of their eyes. And we've all seen Superman. We grew up with the Superman movies in the 80s. So you're kind of locked into a bit of how that's got to sound, but you also want to make it your own.
With the superhero powers, the objective was always to make it sound as organic, as naturally occurring as possible. And then you're right. We all have these preconceived notions that are very subliminal from watching everything we've watched growing up, that, as you talk about, the laser out of the eyes. Well, that goes back to the 50s Superman show. Knowing that we all kind of have that element had to be there, but obviously, yes, make it our own. Do our own thing with it. And make sure it feels like that his body actually can generate this. So we got to be sure to stay away from a Transformers mechanical kind of a sound or a Matrixy mechanical kind of a sound. It always had to be very organic, very biological. So we're working with a lot of just naturally occurring sounds and playing with them what works. And so like the laser eyes, it's like, all right, let's try the sizzle of scrambled eggs in here and let's see how that goes with maybe a little electrical buzz, and trial and error, mixing and matching until we find that perfect combination.
Which was your favorite superhero power to design?
I enjoyed doing A-Train.
So A-Train, for those that haven't seen the show, he can run with super speed.
Yeah.
So how did you tackle that?
I started by playing with his name. It's like, okay, A-Train, train. So one of the signature sounds, hesitate to give away too much, there are train elements in there. Not a lot. One of them is actually a little more prominent than others, but when you're trying to figure out how to sell that speed, I got into the headspace of, all right, he's called A-Train for a reason. So let's have a little of that flavor in there. And that was fun because I kind of got to play with those kinds of elements and see what was going to work and what wasn't. And taking train horns and doing strange things with them to kind of be the signature of his arrival and departure.
Wade, did you have a favorite superhero power sound?
I really like Starlight's powers. I'm not really sure why, but I think hers turned out really, really cool. And it's also more of dynamics with her, because I think A-Train's really cool, and I love that one too, but it's just like in and out, and it's very quick. But with Starlight, we had these fight scenes that we had with her that were just really cool. The different blasts and like coming in and out. I thought that one was a lot of fun.
Yeah, she has a cool kind of build-up, too, before she unleashes.
Yeah, each time as she gets different emotions, whether, most of the time anger or panic or stress, kind of the way she gathers the energy from her surroundings. We kind of wanted to use the sound as a way to tell the story of, for the people that aren't familiar with the graphic novel, what her power is, you know what I mean? And her drawing that energy in from whatever's around her, whichever part of the episode and different story points and different scenes, she's drawing it from different things. That was always really cool to play with, whatever was in the room or in the environment at the time, to use those sounds as a part of her build-up to harness the energy for the blasts. It was just, that was a lot of fun.
So what about the dialogue elements for the show? Was there a lot of ADR in this series?
Yes, there was quite a bit of ADR. I would say not a ton of technical ADR. Eric doesn't like using ADR for poor audio quality. So, we would do a lot of work with pulling alts for specific words and trying to save as much of the production as we could. We did have a lot of ADR for story points and stuff like that. It was mostly ads. The Loop Group is insane in this show with all the crowds and like the newscasters. A lot of the newscasters are, we do in group, in post, and, they're used to tell a large portion of the story. So that was a huge chunk of time and energy put into that. There was quite a bit of ADR, but I would say not a ton of technical ADR.
So how big was the group for the Loop Group? How many people were in it?
It depended on the episode, and we have a lot of different episodes that require different languages. Our main base group, I think, was 8 people, right? So we just finished season 2, so I'm trying to remember back to season 1, but, we've had Arabic, Hebrew, different Asian languages. God, there's been so many. And whenever one of those episodes would come, we would have to bring in like almost a whole secondary group to do that stuff. The loop group sessions were a ton of fun in this show.
So what about ambiences? Because the show does take place in a lot of different places. Large portions of the show involve kind of a dank hideout in a basement where you have to kind of convey that they're in a bad neighborhood, but the windows are all kind of closed and they're locked in there. How did you go about building the surroundings?
I built it like they're outside. I mean, that was just, what would we hear if those windows were really thin and we can really hear outside, and let's just go for it and throw all this stuff in there. And then I got to give it up to the mixer, Rich Weingart, who just did a fabulous job of weaving that stuff together, hitting the right sweet spot, knowing exactly where to go with it. I mean, I'd pre-mix it, but obviously I'm not hearing everything together. So all I'm trying to do is get Rich in the neighborhood, and then he's dialing it and putting it together. And the other time thing I'll do is I use speakerphone quite a bit. I love that plugin. And so I will try to pre-process a lot of things so that they already have the natural decaying reverb of, two blocks down or whatever. I want to save Rich 5 minutes if I can. And so if it's 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, I'll take that because I know what we're up against and what kind of time constraints they're on. So I'm going to do that quite a bit too. You're right. And in some of those locations, the off-screen world was really, really key.
You mentioned time constraints. This series is basically like 8 little movies. Like it doesn't look like your average broadcast TV show. Like it's got a lot of production value, a lot of special effects in it. Mixing these couldn't have been, all faders up and go. What was the schedule for this? Like how much edit time did you get per episode? How many days on the mix stage?
It grew and grew. Gosh, I feel like we have a lot more time now than when we started. Let's put it that way. But the producers on the show have been very generous. I feel like we had 3 days to start on the mix stage, but that increased very quickly, depending on the runtime, depending on the nature of the show. The producers were very generous in saying, this episode is very visual effects heavy. It's very effects heavy. You're going to get 5 days on the stage. And if we needed more time, we would do some overtime. It's not like some clients you have that are very strict and just, you need to get it out the door. The people on the show really cared about the sound, and they gave us the time that we needed, which was awesome.
You hit it on the head for me when you say that this was kind of like 8 movies, except to me it was actually more like 1 8 to 9 hour movie. The way it would end up happening is that, we'd theoretically be quote unquote done with episodes 1, 2, or 3, but we weren't really, because sometimes stuff would happen later on and we'd go, oh, hey, look, that person's superpower also does this. Well, okay, now we're going to jump back and be sure that we're updated in previous episodes. My organizational skills have increased exponentially as a result of this project, because being able to keep track of where all the bodies are buried became very important to be able to track everything, know where it all goes. So when you ask me about time, I don't know, and I don't think I want to know. It was a lot. We worked hard. We did a lot, and I'm really happy with the result.
I would love to give a shout out to our re-recording mixers. David already mentioned Rich Weingart, but also our dialogue and music mixer, Alex Fairman. We were a total team on this show, you know what I mean? And in certain instances, they really helped us out, not only with balancing levels, but, if I was cutting a fix on the stage and it was later in the day and I was busy, updating one sound, Rich might be over there trying different things that might be considered editorial on the board. Alex was sliding stuff around, and like loop group to just get the crowds to play perfectly. So I would just love to give them a shout out, because they are really should be included in part of the editorial team, because in certain moments on the stage, they really just had to step up, and they did, so that was a huge part of this whole process.
It sounds fantastic. I was a really big fan of the show, and I can't wait for season 2 to come out. I'm going to be streaming that all night. I'm going to miss a whole night of sleep probably when that comes out. So thank you in advance for that.
We'll send coffee your way.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks so much for having us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Tonebenders is produced by Timothy Muirhead, Renee Coronado, and Teresa Morrow. Theme music is by Mark Strait. Send your emails to info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter via @thetonebenders and join Tonebenders Podcast on Facebook. Support this podcast. You can use our links when you shop at Amazon or B&H, or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click the support button. Thanks for listening.